Tell us about your involvement in local amateur theatre. How did you first get involved?
Well, I've probably been involved about 60 years. Started in high school and then worked and went away. And when we came back from England, worked, and then I retired. And after I retired, I got more involved in it. Well, I did all the WEA courses on computers, and I was still a bit bored because Eric was still working. So they had one on acting. So I thought, I'll have a go at that, fill in some time. And after we finished, the director said, does anyone want to go on a show? And we all said yes, as long as you don't have to sing. And he said, well, it's South Pacific, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to be a fat palm tree.
I started at high school with the Gilbert and Sullivan until my voice broke, which had normally happened in those days, and I gave it away and went playing football. And then I met up with Gerry when I was working, and she was still at college, and I went to see a few of the reviews that she was in, and I enjoyed every one of them. I thought, gee, this is good.
And why have you continued to be involved? After all, there's no fame and fortune in local theatre.
I love the people. I love mushroom. I love the fact you can lose yourself into a part and be something else. I love the atmosphere, and I just like the audience, because they're the important ones. The audience are very important.
I just enjoyed the people. We made a lot of good friends, and they all liked to have a good time, which was good for us as well. And it certainly kept us on our toes, and I think it helps to keep us young.
What's the hardest part and the easiest part of doing a production?
The hardest part are going to the rehearsals when you're not feeling like it and you've got a front up, but you still go because you've committed yourself. And another hard part is when you've got a very small audience and you don't feel like committing yourself to it very much, but they've paid to come and see you, so you've got to give them the performance they deserve. The best part is when they respond well, and you have a responsive audience and they go along with you and they enjoy it. It's hard to speak to a non-committed audience that just sits and looks at you.
One that really comes to mind is Money Honey.
Yeah, that's the one. That was Money Honey. It was all a mock from the private club.
The response we got from that was tremendous. And that Saturday afternoon, that last one, where they're lined up down the street trying to get in, if the fire brigade had come when they were all in, they had hit the roof. They would have.
Tell me about your best and worst shows, your best and worst shows, and why?
Well, the one I've always remembered is the first one that I did. I'd been in dinner shows where I didn't have any words to talk, I just sang. Yeah. And I had a small part in this, and this was Damn Yankees. And 2 weeks before we were due to perform, and I got a phone call about 8 o'clock that night after we got home, and he said, well, you take it on. And he had 2 parts to do. And anyway, the show came on, I did them, I made no mistakes, and I had a great time.
The best show I've been in, probably Money Honey, because I enjoyed that. Probably the hardest one was one where we had to wear we hired these costumes from Sydney Opera, and they were heavy and drab. It was that one about...
Kiss Me Kate.
Kiss Me Kate. Yeah, we hired all these costumes, and you could hardly walk around the stage in it. They were that heavy. And by the end of the time, they were very much on the nose. It's cost me $50 to have that dress dry cleaned.
Given that you've travelled extensively, you've lived in London, how would you compare good amateur theatre versus professional productions?
The difference with professional productions is the money for costumes and staging and things like that. But Marie and Graham, friends of ours in Sydney, came up and they saw Jekyll and Hyde in Newcastle at the Civic, and Graham could not be convinced it was an amateur production. A good amateur production with the actors in many cases is as good, if not better, than a professional, but it's the money spent on all the rest of it. But then a show is not costumes and a show is not staging. A show is the people in it. So if you get good people, you don't need all that rest of it.
If you got a do-over, what would you do differently?
There are more opportunities for people these days. When I started off, there were no opportunities. There was no YPT, there was no young people theatre. There was nothing like that. Yeah. Newcastle is a good area for starting off in theatre these days, and a lot of the Sydney productions get from young people from Newcastle. If I had to speak to people today about it, I'd say get an all-rounded career in music, learn to read music, try and get into a school that's a performing arts high school, get involved in something like young people's theatre, get involved in it and know the ropes and know the people and know the contacts. But at the same time, get a career, that you've got something to go back on if you don't make it in theatre. If you want to get involved in theatre itself, do hairdressing, do dressmaking, do something like that, or learn to play an instrument, get involved in it that way, as well as going performing. Okay.
And finally, what advice would you give to young people thinking about joining a theatre troupe?
Sit back quietly initially, get introduced, and then watch and observe for a little while before you start trying to get into it. I remember one director said that good actors are good people watchers. Observe people, observe their behaviours. To get into a theatre group, as I said, go through the avenues of young people's theatre, performing arts high school, something like that, but do training in many ways, such as go into a local band. Get some training so that you've got something to offer when you go into a group. Eric?
Well, I think they've got to go to something like Young People's Theatre or go to a school that specialises in drama and theatre to get a basis to work with. And also, if you can make it so you can play an instrument or do something else, makeup, it's always handy as a backup when periods you're not actually in a show.
Thank you very much.